In this short video, we're going to take a look at service excellence and rating systems in the hospitality industry. So let's get started. Hospitality service. What is service? Service separates the tangible product, which is something like the food product, let's say this wonderful turkey, from the service and the person who brings it to you, the intangible gifts, right, of an individual who creates an experience. So one way to think of a service or hospitality service is to think about what is the intangible, what is the thing that you can't get at home when you cook the food, but that you can get in a restaurant, as an example. And that service, ultimately, that hospitality, is the intangible and not just the product, because we deliver more than just a product. We're not a retail operation. We actually go beyond that and sell to the individual an act of service, which is known as hospitality service. We're going to take a brief pause here to take a look at the history of the pineapple. So you may see the pineapple logo in hospitality schools. You may see it out etched on glasses or bowls or punch bowls especially. This is the international symbol of hospitality. And the pineapple, the story goes that when colonial settlers came to the Americas, primarily looking at Central America, they would be, and Puerto Rico among them, they would be given by the indigenous peoples pineapple, which was seen as an exotic fruit. Of course, they were given many other vegetables and fruits, which they would put on their ships and bring back to Europe, especially to England and Spain at the time. And what would last would be those items which had generally a tough skin, those items which could stay shelf stable without refrigeration for a long period of time. And one of those very key items was the pineapple. And so back in Europe, after the settlers came back from their voyages to Europe, they would bring these exotic fruits like pineapple, and they would serve them to the very noble affair. So early explorers, again, brought them home, placed them outside the homes to let everyone know they had returned, and tired travelers are welcome to join them for a hot meal and lodging. So it's important to consider both sides of this story. The book really only tells one, and that is in the fact that it's seen as this element of prestige for the very high and well-off people of Europe. But also it's important to recognize that this is part of indigenous culture and a sharing mechanism by the indigenous culture to show a spirit of hospitality. So the spirit of hospitality is more so represented in the indigenous cultures of the Americas than it is in the colonial times or the settlers in Europe. So I want to make that distinction that I think the book may fail to do. And so that's why we have the pineapple today, and why we shall continue to revere the indigenous cultures here in America as those representing hospitality just as well. So who is involved with the guest service experience? Well, the short answer is everyone. So we may have these wonderful charts that we create, organization charts for our organizations, like a large-scale hotel like this one is for, but all of the guest service and hospitality starts from the top, from people like the corporate executives and managers, all the way down to the general managers, and all the way down to even the dishwasher, because everyone has an element to play in both internal and external hospitality. Internal hospitality is the hospitality delivered to the employees or among the employees. So that means that the spirit and energy that a dishwasher comes in is just as important as that a corporate executive comes. Everyone is there to be a servant first and a leader second, so that they become a servant leader. So that includes both back of house, what we call BOH, or front of house, FOH, employees. There are many foundations for service excellence, but here are just some basics. So we have guests, not customers or clients. You can also extend that to say that the guest pays our bills. The guest is always right, or are they? Nowadays, we look at things like enlightened or empowered hospitality as elements of saying that our employees are first rather than our guests, because the common notion is always that guests are first. But the reality is, if we take care of our employees, they in turn will take care of the guests. And so now there's a lot of movement towards ensuring that we're taking care of and empowering our employees, especially our frontline employees, to make decisions that are going to be best for our customer. So we want to be guest focused in everything we do still. What you don't say says a lot. So especially in uh, our industry where performance and kind of acting is an important part of what we do in the personal experience, your bodily language can say a lot about the tonality, and that of course represents the brand that you work for. So you want to make sure you keep that in check as well. You have two ears and one mouth for a reason, right? So power of listening in hospitality. Moments of truth are more than just the first impression. So if there's a mistake that's made, it can be crippling to your organization if you don't handle it in a proper way. So training those employees to be empowered and to be able to make decisions. Look like the Ritz-Carlton, their front of house, front desk people generally have somewhere between $2,000 and $5,000 in which to make a single customer happy. So if something's going wrong, they're empowered and have the ability to spend that money to make it whole with the customer and make sure that they continue to be a customer with the Ritz-Carlton as an example. Give guests what they want, not what you want. It's not just about a level of service that you're just giving out what you want. It's responding to the customer. I think one criticism I'll give to the restaurant industry recently is the advent of the celebrity chef has created a different working system in restaurants whereby the chef is always right. They give out the food at the time that they believe is right. They don't course things out. It's all what they say, and they've forgotten what the guests have wanted and that they are there in a restaurant to restore. There's no joke that those two words all have the same prefix, and so they forget about the act of restoration and that individual customization towards the customer rather than to just serving the needs of the business. The 10-2 rule, this is one where, in hospitality, if someone is within 10 feet of you, you acknowledge them, generally with some sort of nonverbal communication, a smile, or, presenting yourself to them and not turning your back to them. And then when they get within 2 or 4 feet, you're going to want to make sure that you make some sort of verbal communication. Hello, how's your day? Those types of things, right? So quintessential example of that, if someone is a housekeeper and someone's walking down the hall, you want to make sure to acknowledge them and give them a smile. But as they come closer to you or your cart in the hallway, you want to be sure to acknowledge them with some sort of verbal greeting and make sure that there's not something that they might need or that they may have to better serve them. It takes no more time to be hospitable. Of course, it's your job, you're acting, it makes the job better, and ultimately you are there to serve the guest, and there should be no rush in hospitality. It should simply be the natural, charismatic way about you for your general day. Also important is the power of soft skills. So we've kind of been mentioning some of these items of nonverbal communication. Otherwise, this has somewhat to do with our soft skills as well. So hard skills are your skill, ability, aptitude, teachability, right? So you may have the highest IQ in the room, but do you have the highest EQ, which is your emotional quotient? You can think of hard skills as those intellectual skills and soft skills as those emotional skills. So the ability to listen, the ability to communicate, and the ability to empathize with the guest, especially in one of those moments of truth. These skills also apply to when you are within your operation, the internal hospitality that you give your employees. So are you able to listen, communicate, and empathize to them the same way that you would your guests? There are 12 professional skills, as we like to say. Of course, there are probably many more of these, but you can see some listed there. We've talked about listening before, being attentive to your guests and to your employees, good communication, making sure that you're communicating proactively, right? So think of like, at an airport, when something is wrong with the plane, they have to be able to communicate beforehand and all the way throughout. Otherwise, people get very anxious. And as more and more time goes by, people get even more anxious. So think about that in terms of your hospitality organization as well too. Are you communicating not just to your staff, but to outwardly to your customers in a proactive sense to ensure that they're not getting anxious as well? Flexibility and creativity, of course, body language. We talked about some nonverbal communication. It's very important to have that professional, hospitable presence. That includes things like not pointing, but extending the hospitality hand, as you'll get into more in your professionalism course. Teamwork, empathy, patience, confidence, decision making. These are all qualities, which have been instilled in us, likely through any, sports or any even music, discipline, activity that we've done before. Positive attitude, and of course a sense of humor, so being able to keep people engaged but also keeping them in a jovial mood is important. Service recovery, we've talked about these moments of truth a little bit. Service recovery is acting on that a moment of truth, and it's the action taken after service failure to correct the situation and to try to save the guest for future business, right? So we talked about that kind of example with Ritz-Carlton and the ability to purchase or provide what's necessary to the guest to make them happy and make them whole again, ultimately. How service recovery works: first of all, it's got to be a quick response. You have to take ownership for what happened. It's important to do that in a way that doesn't represent legal liability, which you might talk about in your legal liability course, but it's a way that says, look, we're listening to you, we know it's a problem, let's find a solution to it. So the next step then, of course, is to solve the problem, to follow through with the guest and make sure that you're responding and following up with them later. If something happened, a room wasn't ready, then when they get in their room a short while after, are you able to call them, maybe send them up a gift and make sure that they're doing okay. And finally, to communicate and document that so that the same service issues don't happen again and again, but that they're being taken care of right away in the first instance that it happens, and learning from your mistakes. Service quality standards, guest service best practices are easily transferable from one industry to another, right? There's no joke that companies that are outside of the hospitality industry are starting to pull hospitality executives because they want to add hospitality to their line of service. One good example of that, I can think of a clinic system that hired a chief operating officer out of the hospitality industry, worked in the hotel sector for a long time, because they found that in their service they weren't providing enough internal hospitality nor external hospitality. They were just operating as a profit-driven business and not focused on those soft skills that we talked about. So we have a couple of companies, Walt Disney, Ritz-Carlton, even some others who've set some of these service quality standards, which have been the hallmark for other businesses in the retail sector, in hotel care, hospice care, or hospital care, or other person-driven activities. But you can even see those in other disparate organizations like automakers and others who've taken these service quality standards to heart. Now we're going to change to rating systems. Just a short little message on those. They're designed to identify hotels, restaurants, other hospitality businesses based upon the standards and guidelines that they have optionally set, and they're also the ones that the rating systems create to ensure consistency, but also to ensure excellence. So some examples of those include AAA, which is the American Automobile Association, which is a travelers organization, which rates them on a diamond system based on their meeting the standards of AAA. Forbes, which is the 5-star system, right? So we have a Forbes 5-star hotel in Wisconsin, which is part of the Kohler Connection. Then also the Michelin Star Guide in restaurants, which provides up to 3 stars for restaurants based on their service. And an example of some of the tests that some of the Michelin Guide individuals may have is when they dine in your restaurant, they may put a fork down on the floor next to your seat and next to the seat of the customer, and they're looking to see if the individual who is the service personnel, the waiter, waitress, bus person, is going to notice that fork and pick it up, even when it's not necessarily dropped on the floor. So it's very small microanalytical things which create these rating systems and help deliver higher service quality. We also have then kind of the consumer version of that, which is the heavy reliance on social media by today's guests, Word of mouth, of course, is becoming the most important marketing tool a hotel or restaurant can have. And word of mouth is not just online, but it's also the spoken word between two or more people. And so maintaining that positive online reputation can have a huge impact on sales. So you can see a lot of the online services here. You have Yellow Pages, TripAdvisor, Google, Yelp, City Search, Bing. Of course, there are many, many more that have come after that. And these are, again, instantaneous. So it's important to manage those. You must have someone on the facility, whether manager or otherwise, that is also going to make part of their work to manage these customer-driven online review rating systems as well. In summary, guest service is vital to the success of any hospitality business. Knowing how to provide outstanding guest service will make you that much more valuable to potential employers and also to employees for that matter. And service recovery is also important as it can help save a guest who did not have a great experience, but it is your chance to keep them as a future guest. And finally, guest service is what separates your business from others and makes every day of your time in the hospitality industry more rewarding. Again, this is really the difference between hospitality and service. So hospitality service really lends itself more to that intangible service, whereas just service is kind of like a retail organization selling a product. So it's important to keep that distinction in check as you deliver your quality service to your guest.